It's 20th November 1979. The city of Mecca, the spiritual heart of Islam, awakens to what seems like any other day. Thousands of pilgrims gather at the Grand Mosque to perform the dawn prayer, the Fajr. But what they don't know is that their sanctuary is about to be turned into a battleground. Armed militants storm the mosque, taking worshippers hostage and sealing off every entrance. This is the beginning of one of the most shocking events in modern Islamic history, the Siege of Mecca. To understand how this happened, we need to step back to Saudi Arabia in the 1970s. The kingdom was undergoing rapid transformation, fueled by oil wealth and a desire to modernize. The construction of skyscrapers, Western businesses, and loosening of traditional norms marked a time of significant change. For the monarchy, this was a step to bring Saudi Arabia into the modern world. But not everyone saw it that way. Many devout Saudis felt the country was straying from its religious roots, viewing the influx of Western culture, rapid urbanization, and monarchy's opulence as threats to the conservative interpretation of Islam. It was in this climate that an extremist movement began, led by Juhayman al-otaybi. Juhayman al-otaybi came from a religious family and had received military training in the National Guard. Disenchanted with the government and its perceived departure from Islamic values, he left to form a radical group. His aim? To return Saudi Arabia to a pure Islam. Juhayman's ideology was rooted in the belief that the monarchy had become corrupt and needed to be overthrown. He claimed that modernization was a deviation from Islam. But there was another key belief that fueled their radicalism, the Mahdi. In Islamic eschatology, the Mahdi is a messianic figure who will appear before the end of times to restore justice and faith. Juhayman believed his brother-in-law, Muhammad al-Qahtani, was the Mahdi and that they had a divine duty to announce his arrival and begin a global Islamic revolution. With this belief driving them, Juhayman's followers hatched a plan to make their vision a reality. And what better place to launch a religious revolution than the Grand Mosque of Mecca, the most sacred site in Islam? Over time, they smuggled weapons into the mosque compound, hiding them in coffins under the pretext of bringing in deceased pilgrims for funeral rites. They gathered forces, about 400 to 500 strong, consisting of Saudi dissidents, radical students, and a few foreign fighters. Their plan was to seize the mosque during the early morning prayers when it was filled with worshippers. On 20th November, as the faithful gathered, the militants stormed the mosque, locking down its gates and overpowering the unarmed security. Gunfire erupted, and terrified pilgrims were caught in the middle. Juhayman's men took control of the mosque's loudspeakers, proclaiming that the Mahdi had come and calling on Muslims to rise against the corrupt rulers. The news of the siege spread quickly, causing shock and confusion. How could this happen in the holiest place in Islam? And what did it mean for Saudi Arabia and the Muslim community? The Saudi monarchy faced a dilemma. They needed to retake the mosque and end the rebellion but had to consider religious sensitivities. Violence in the Grand Mosque could lead to backlash. The Saudis initially tried to negotiate, but Juhayman refused. The monarchy mobilized the National Guard and army, but the militants were well positioned to fight to the death. The standoff continued for days, with militants well supplied and entrenched in the minarets and underground chambers. It was a battle not just of physical strength but of ideology. After several failed attempts to storm the mosque, the Saudis sought help from French special forces, specifically the group d'Intervention de la Gendarmerie Nationale, gign, experts in counter-terrorism. As non-Muslims were not allowed in Mecca, the French trained Saudi forces and advised them on the assault. They provided tactical advice and equipment like tear gas. The Saudi government also reached out to Pakistani commandos from the Elite Special Services Group, SSG, experts in urban combat. Being Muslim, they entered Mecca and participated in the military assault. The SSG played a crucial role in the final offensive, working closely with Saudi forces to break the stronghold. The Saudis launched a final offensive to reclaim the mosque. The fighting was brutal. Tear gas, explosions, and intense gunfire filled the air as Saudi and Pakistani commandos cleared out militants. The battles extended deep into the mosque's underground passages. Finally, after 2 weeks of fighting, the Saudis regained full control. The remaining militants were captured, and their leader, Juhayman, was swiftly brought to justice. The siege left hundreds dead, including militants, Saudi soldiers, and civilians. Juhayman and his surviving followers were executed, sending a message to would-be revolutionaries. The siege's aftermath had a profound impact. The monarchy tightened religious restrictions, empowered religious police, and imposed stricter public behavior regulations, shaping Saudi society for decades. It also inspired other extremist movements and altered the perception of religious militancy in the Middle East. The siege of Mecca was a turning point where faith, politics, and power violently collided in the holiest of places. The siege of Mecca remains one of the most significant yet least discussed events in Islamic history. It shows how religion and politics intertwine, how beliefs can lead to radical actions, and how one event can change the course of a nation's history.